Hi, everybody. Welcome to Digital Trust Talks, yet another edition. Here to talk about non-human identities. Ted Shorter, CTO of Keyfactor, here with my colleague and friend Admir Abdurahmanovic. We're just going to get into talking about non-human identities. It's a topic and a term that I think is relatively recent, but the concept has been around forever. So we thought it might be fun just to kind of talk through a little bit of the history of how we got to where we are with non-human identities. And I don't know if Admir, not to put you on the spot, but like you've been clear, obviously before we joined forces with PrimeKey back in 2021, you've been in this space for as long as I have, if not longer. And can you think of like what is the first sort of thing that you would describe that like PrimeKey was involved in that would now be called a non-human identity that you can think of?
I would say it could have been most likely passports in the history of the company. Strictly speaking, non-human identities, because we had certificates, of course, issued for human users, but the passport starts to be almost kind of a device, especially biometric passport with built-in chip, etc., etc. But then, of course, as there are so many use cases for PKI, we learned to utilize certificates for a bunch of other purposes. As you say, before machine identity or NHI, non-human identity, was invented. You would have it in some of the advanced manufacturers who were building in certificates for, say, in telecom or smartphone devices. Now the term would have been, say, bootstrap certificate or birth certificate. And basically they were looking to put identities throughout to devices as they are entering supply chain and assuring that the supply chain is secure. So yeah, in some ways, some of these technologies that we are talking today in 2025 existed already 15 plus years ago, but we spoke in different terms. Certainly, there have been some evolution in a positive sense, even though I'm skeptical of the term non-human identities. It's to me, it smells, Ted, mostly like a marketing term. Nothing bad about marketing, but like coming from the mathematical background, when you define something with negation, then you have to think what is HI. If it's non-HI, so what is the human identity? And then we say everything else is non-human identity, right?
That's the most mathematical definition of non-human identities I think I've ever heard. But it's true, right? It's really anything that's not a human. I guess I think back historically. The first thing I can remember doing that would now be called, and actually even it was IoT before we even called it IoT, right? Internet of Things. It was medical devices, things that, and it really just came from an organization reaching out to us and saying, hey, we're building these things. They need to communicate. They need to accept firmware updates. They need to, phone home to get, to present telemetry information, whatever. We need to make sure they're authentic. They need a cryptographic key with an identity attached to them, of course, which is typically a certificate. And that's really where it started. It was more just sort of, it came from, a means to an end of like, hey, we need some way to do this. We need a durable, high assurance identity that's attached to these things that we're making. And then later we called that Internet of Things. And of course, there's billions of Internet of Things devices. And so that's a type of non-human identity. Certainly, there's all sorts of, now. And I remember too, like as Internet of Things started to become a term, there was some level of debate at the time of like, hey, what's the right way to secure these things? How do you authenticate these things? Is PKI too old a technology to do this, right? But I think, maybe PKI as it was envisioned in 1998 might not have been suitable for IoT devices, but the idea of binding an identity to a key is what you need to do to authenticate, and of course the certificate does that implicitly, and so it has become one of certainly the most widely used de facto standard for for IoT devices.
Totally. So in some ways, there have been predictions of demise of PKI 15 or 20 years ago, and it kind of rebounces. And of course, we have added new standards, refined every year. Best practices are being refined as to reflect the new use cases, or as you were touching on, the scale.
Mm-hmm.
When the first initial IoT use cases were out there, we were talking about tens of thousands, maybe hundreds of thousands of devices. Today, it's not unusual to think in millions, if not hundreds of millions. So the scale is completely different. And of course, the underlying technologies that support the PKI, I don't know, say HSMs, hardware security modules, have significantly improved throughout the years, both in terms of capability, which type of algorithms and the key sizes that they support, but also how we are managing them, how we are accessing them, how the organizations can make best use of them. Back in the days, HSMs, you would put them in your own data center. And that has evolved throughout the years to put it with your cloud provider.
Mm-hmm.
Now there is in certain industries also idea to bring it back home for some situations. But coming back on non-human identities, one of the examples why I like to be precise with our customers when they trust us and we give them advice how best to do something, right? So what would be, if you say, consider a dog passport, or if you consider like on the big farms, every cow has this little thingy, in their ear, and they're being identified. So is that non-human identity or human? Right? It can't be human identity because it's a cow or it's my dog. But how do we?
Yeah, a lot of animals get microchipped too.
Exactly.
I love that. And now you're almost philosophical in terms of non-human identities,
I like to how to say, maybe split here on the semantics sometimes, but it is important also for us when we are talking with our customers to be precise in the sense when they're utilizing different type of technologies, and we make recommendations how to scale up, assure that they can scale up, production, or say if it's something called connected to commerce, how can they beef up during the sales periods, Black Fridays, Christmas sales, or just manufacturing. We need to be able to help them and be precise, because if they don't understand us, we might not understand them, and then it turns out to be less than optimal situation. Of course, we have had so many good use cases at Keyfactor across different industries. So I don't think that we are imprecise. It's just that I'm splitting hair, I guess.
Yeah, I think it's just people are trying to find a term to lump all of these things together, right? And there's a lot of potential different ways to do that. But I think if you sort of move forward, you mentioned cloud. Certainly things like Kubernetes clusters, things like that has launched this whole concept of things like a new, sometimes called workload identities, right? So a whole set of robotic process automation, business automation, various sorts of business tasks that also need identities that are performing functions inside of the organization that gave rise to technologies and protocols, things like SPIFFE, for example, that issuing certificates to this whole other set of workload identities and that sort of thing. Again, very large scale comes to mind. Similar, it started with maybe you don't need certificates for that, but certificates now are used. They're sort of baked into almost to every Kubernetes cluster, right? They're automatic issuance and so forth. We have customers replacing that with other things. But I think I wanted to spend a little time with the rise of AI and especially agentic AI. I think that's sort of the next frontier of non-human identities, right? And we're seeing clearly agentic AI, it's a process. Sometimes people even refer to agentic AI as like a junior employee. Clearly, you don't want to just give a junior employee, if you really are going to treat AI like a junior employee, you don't want to sign them in with your own credentials and let them go do stuff. And so I think you see this phase, any new technology, whether it's IoT, cloud, even workload identities, and certainly AI, the initial entries into these things are quite insecure. IoT devices get hacked, and so forth, and then they start to adopt more secure practices going on. I think we're at that same phase with agentic AI, where there's a lot of very insecure things happening.
One great friend of mine and great person in this industry, the other day I was on a call with somebody else, and then he said he said we are where we were at HTTP time. Mm-hmm. And for the audience, that's Ted who said S. And truly, in terms of comparison, that's I think the most shortest and most brilliant comparison. We have a rapid evolution of all kinds of technologies, just as we are talking about agentic AIs and Kubernetes workload identities. We are talking essentially about API keys. We are talking about different type of tokens, be it OAuth or JWT. Maybe we are talking about some passwords, access to, databases. There might be you talking about encryption keys or SSH keys. And of course, about certificates in context of TLS, MTLS, or SPIFFE, speaking of the workflow identities. So that's why I really loved your comparison, because we have so many moving things, and that's where we need to help our customers to be sure that they are doing the right thing. Just the mere problem of delegation, as you was touching to, is horrendous. We know that
you can't. Obviously, you can't just be signing in with someone else's.
Yeah, we know those best practices from before, from the enterprise security, where nobody would think to borrow credentials to the colleague. Okay, can you please do this for me or something? But similar strict approach has to be done here. Yeah. What we do have a problem is that some of these new technologies have, from the security perspective, run too far, too quickly, without considerations, and that now we are superimposing on top of it. Say MCP, great idea, but now we consider it a potential security nightmare.
Security always lags in new technology, and clearly we're there with AI. There's a lot of very insecure things happening, a lot of fixed API keys and things that are not, they're basically shared usernames and passwords, but somehow app identity and an API key sounds better, but it's really the same thing. But I think, if you break it down, and this goes back to like whether it's an IoT device, whether it's a workload, whether it's agentic AI, there's this fundamental set of things that you need to be able to do, right? You need to know what it is. And then you need to be able to define strict access controls on what it should or shouldn't be allowed to do or access. You need to be able to, if it's an IoT device, have it accept, secure updates or that sort of thing. And you need a way to turn it off if it, either when you're done using it, or if it, in the case of AI, if it goes rogue, or even a human employee for that matter, if somebody goes off the rails. But all of that starts with identity, right? If you don't have a strong identity, if you don't know what this thing is, you can't answer questions like what should it have access to, how should I turn it off, which thing am I even turning off? And so, it just all comes back to that identity piece. And I think we've just seen historically, often the insecure initial versions of these things start without using certificates and then wind up kind of gravitating back to using certificates. IoT devices, same thing with workloads, Kubernetes, et cetera. I do expect the same thing to happen with agentic AI. But right now it seems mostly, when we're playing around with different AI tools and so forth. Most of it is, hey, sign in with your username and password here, and I'll use that to go do whatever it is I need to do. And I don't even know what it's doing, right? Which that's not going to fly in wide scale production use. And neither is a fixed API key that never changes and can be stolen.
It might be sufficient for testing purposes or home, but for the enterprise we can't do it like that. And to your point, yeah, there are already emerging some suggestions how we should go about.
Yep.
That's really great. Again, we can borrow from ideas from Kubernetes. That we have something that is contained, something that we know identity of, and there we have to be very careful because we have almost morphing qualities of AI agents. One, the agent that I'm using today for, I don't know, my travel schedule might be different from the perspective of software code, a different agent tomorrow. So we need to assure properly what is its identity in the technical terms, not in the terms of my usage, right? So then we are coming back also to some sorts of code signing if you want to put something in production. There are also great ideas coming from Docker about putting MCP servers behind a MCP gateway. Then again, borrowing ideas from back 20 years ago, I don't know, firewalls and different types.
Yeah, it is. I mean, I think
work as a guardians.
Exactly, and I think that's the one takeaway, right? AI is new, but the tools that we need to secure it, most of them are already here, right? It's things that we've already used, the same sort of protocols, or at least concepts, things like reverse proxies, right? MCP with a proxy in between, these things all kind of, it's the things that we've been using to help secure enterprises for the last 15 or 20 years can still absolutely apply to securing AI. It's not like we necessarily need to invent a whole lot of new technology to secure them. Clearly, there will be innovation and so forth as well. But let's at least start with the controls and the technologies and the things that have been used to secure the enterprise.
Otherwise, we are basically running Windows 95 on the open internet with our MCP servers.
Yeah, exactly.
Not protected. And nothing wrong about Microsoft and Windows 95 in 1995, but now 30 years afterwards, and we really need to be way more careful. We have already seen in Black Hat and other conferences this year demonstrations how just clever prompt engineering or just clever insertion of certain data can create major headaches. For that reason, coming back to your point about utilizing technologies where we know what are the boundaries, and we are aware of the security model, not only identity itself, but security model of how do we trust an identity and how two instances or two devices can talk to each other. That's fundamentally important. Another good thing about say utilizing certificates, be it MTLS or SPIFFE, is like you can have a relatively cheaply done kill switch. Yeah, I'm just gonna I'm gonna revoke all certificates in that sub 3 until I feel safe that my nuclear power plant is not gonna explode or whatever is the big issue. But for quite many businesses today, we see PKI being used in the revenue generating flows. And additional agents, AI agents, of course, is going to bring us a certain level of productivity boost, but it cannot be at the cost of security. So we need to track. And of course, our colleagues, engineers here at Keyfactor are monitoring all of this, and we are being very, reading every day and every night all kind of new suggestions and potentially new standards emerging that can help us consolidate the field and make sure that everybody talks similar type of security lingo there.
Yep. No, that all makes sense. Well, I think we're starting to run out of time. So maybe I'll let you have maybe one last thought, Admir, if you want to. Any takeaways that you want to leave for anybody that's watching this?
Well, as scary as it might be, there are mechanisms that can be used, and I would go with experimentations at home. I would not do something production-wise unless I'm taking it from some very renowned vendor. I don't know, without commercial advertisement, but say Salesforce. I would trust Salesforce. I wouldn't trust a new vendor. Probably Salesforce is very keen on not hurting their brand by pushing out something that might be crazy unsecure. So a good level of skepticism, but also adoption. We cannot avoid this. This will happen with or without security. Probably with security is way better.
Yeah, and I think, I mean, to me, whether it's an IoT device, call it a non-human identity, whatever, whether it's an IoT device, a workload, an AI agent, or anything in between, it needs an identity. It needs a strong identity, a durable identity, and then once you have that, there's all sorts of policies, controls, and so forth you can apply from that. But obviously, it all starts with knowing what it is. And being able to.
If you don't know what it is, you don't know what you're dealing with.
Exactly. Yeah. It's fundamental. So, but anyway, thank you all very much for listening to our Digital Trust Talks series. Again, Ted and Admir signing off, and we'll talk to you soon.
Live long and prosper.
I can do that too.